Well, good evening. This is the October meeting of the Madison DX Club. And tonight we will be getting hearing a great presentation from Dan, W4DKS, on the Sable Island Dxpedition. It was originally scheduled for last year, then this year, but it's going forward next year. Dan comes to us from, is it Centerville, Virginia, I believe?
Centerville, Virginia, near Manassas.
Yep, and Dan is on the board of directors of the IOTA, and perhaps in the future, that might be another subject we'd like to talk about, Islands on the Air. And he's has a great DX record and history. And as I said in our announcement, you know, here is someone who not only is like all of us on the one side of the DX pileups, but will give us kind of a view as to what's happening there on the island in that remote DX location as they go through it. So Lloyd, if you want to fire up the program, here it comes. Dan, it's all yours.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Kevin, for hosting me. This is a great honor. And I know Murray wanted to be here, but his schedule wouldn't allow, so he asked me to step in, and here I am. I appreciate your help, and Bob, W9EWZ, and Lloyd for running the show. And that said, we'll get moving. I will stop after the Sable Island part for any questions. And then we've got a brief run through the CY9C operation from St. Paul that we participated in back in August 2019. So with that, we'll get going. This is the lure and the challenge of Sable Island. The lure, that's an easy one. This is as you can see, it's a beautiful stretch of dune. It's rugged, very isolated. It's 26 miles long. It's a sandbar, and it's only 177 miles from Halifax. What couldn't be more alluring than that? It does count as a separate DXCC country, obviously. You can fly there. You almost have to fly there. And you need special permission. That's the stuff hams live for. And of course, we want to make as many of our ham colleagues happy by making as many QSOs as we can during the 7 or 8 days that we're on the island. That's why we're going. Next, please. Okay, so I went through my my QSL box, my personal box, and I found this QSL from the very first operation from Sable Island. And this is from 1979, October 1975, excuse me. And it had just become a new country along with St. Paul. The first operation, this VX9 Alpha, was in October. It was mostly a team made up from Ontario. They did charter a plane. They had a beautiful card. This is just one side. It actually is a large fold-out card and with a lot of great information about Sable Island on it. Interestingly, and we'll get into weather as we go through the presentation, weather actually delayed their departure from the island for a fairly significant amount of time, and they actually made 7,000 additional contacts while they were waiting for the weather to clear so they could take off and head back to Halifax. Next, please. You'll see these around the island, I understand. These are for the protection and warning about the endangered birds and horses that live on the island and transit the island. They are the #1 priority. We will do everything we can while we're there to make sure we don't harm any of the wildlife on the island. Next. These are the Sable Island horses. There's lots of them. You can see the gray seals in the background. There's also lots of them. And I'll talk about this in a moment, but there are 500 of these horses on the island. They're thriving, and there are 50,000 of the gray seals. Next, please. Another shot of a group of the horses. This is one of the freshwater ponds. There are several on the island, thankfully. Provides fresh water for the horses. Also keeps the grass growing and the multiple plants that the horses eat. So they're thriving. And that's the good news. And the horses are the subject of a lot of research by folks from Canada and throughout the world. They'd love to go see the horses. Next. Some perspective for where Sable is compared to Nova Scotia. 177 miles offshore. It's 1,463 miles from Madison, for anybody that cares. Next, please. A little higher shot, just gives you a better perspective of where it is in relationship to North America. Next. So here's the meat. So Sable, as I mentioned, is 300 kilometers from Halifax. It's 42 kilometers or 26 miles long, 1.5 kilometers wide. It's known for its massive number of shipwrecks. These were caused mostly by fog and the fact that Sable is located in a major shipping channel. It became a national park in 2011, and it's currently managed by Parks Canada. And there's a team of 3 Parks Canada staff that rotate to and from Sable throughout the year. I mentioned there are 500 wild horses. Interestingly, during bad weather, Murray told me this story. The horses congregate behind the dooms for protection from the elements. And they do it, pardon my pun, but I guess they jockey for position and move around, and maybe the smarter ones get inside before the other ones do. And anyway, it's that would be probably something to see. And the weather there can be brutal. As I'll mention in a few minutes, 50,000 gray seals, 340 species of birds that either live, nest, or transit Sable. The weather station was for a long time semi-automated. It is now fully automated, I think, since just a couple of years. Just back in 2019, it became a fully automated weather station. It became a DXCC country in 1975. Limited transportation options. I don't think any of the previous operations went by boat. I think they all flew probably. The weather and beach conditions are very challenging. That'll be a theme throughout the rest of the presentation. The sandbar itself was formed by Labrador currents and Gulf Stream currents meeting in the North Atlantic. Go ahead, please. So Murray and the rest of us were determined to pull this off, and it's been 3 years in the making. In 2019, the original team and planning began, and this was the 2019 CY9C team that activated St. Paul. Here's the website for a future reference. There's lots of good stuff there. You'll see in a few moments about the team members. You can certainly go to that website and look up the very impressive bona fides of all the operators that are going. We also have 30 major sponsors, and they've been really good about being patient with us. Of course, during the COVID pandemic, there haven't been many operations at all. So the money is building up, thankfully, and the sponsors have been really, really patient with us. We've had a number of changes to the team since the 2019 planning began. Some dropped off. We've gotten some great new additions, you'll see. So we joke about the best time to go to Sable Island. There really isn't the best time. Weather is always an issue. I guess the one thing that maybe is a consideration is that during the winter it is colder. But even during the summer, it can be pretty challenging weather-wise. That makes attempting to get to the island extremely challenging, as I'll talk about in a minute. Let's see. Keep going. So there were a number of operations prior to 2010, but none of them were really significant except for one. There was a fairly large operation from a group that operated from CY0 Mickey Mouse, Mike, and that was in 2002. And they were on the island from what I can tell for about 2 weeks. So, and they were very active on all bands, all modes. They may have been the very first RTTY operation. I can't confirm that, but they made thousands of contacts, I know, and did a great job. They also had the good fortune to be in the height of the sunspot cycle. So they had openings around the clock to almost everywhere in the world. But that's been 20 years ago. So that takes us to the 2010 timeframe. In 2009, there was an activity that had to be canceled due to a family sickness. In October 2010, as you can see, Randy and N0TG and Rick AI5P tried to get out there on the aircraft, and apparently there was a crack in the axial. So they returned to the States. I guess the aircraft wasn't going to be repaired for a length of time, and they didn't want to hang around. In December 2010, Murray, Ron, A4VK, and Randy tried again. Another storm. The beach landing area was underwater. They again had to return to the USA prior to getting out to the island. 2011, a group finally made it. Randy, and I think I got a typo on this call sign. It should be N1 Sugar Nancy Bravo and K8 Ellie Lee did get to the island, but they had terrible weather, severe cold. It was March, as I understand it, they had a successful operation, but they didn't fare well health-wise. In December 2011, Murray and Ron tried again, and again the beach was underwater, no landing area, returned to the States. And finally, in 2012, Murray and Ron tried again. They made it to the island. Conditions were superb. They made a lot of contacts, a lot of 10-meter and 12-meter openings. But unfortunately, many of you may recall Hurricane Sandy came up the East Coast, a rare hurricane that actually came up the East Coast, did a lot of damage in New Jersey. And then I think moved offshore, and ended up causing significant damage up the eastern shoreboard. And it caused Murray and Ron to have to vacate the island after, I think, 4 or 5 days. In 2015, there was some sporadic activity by 2 Canadians, VA1AXC and VE1AWW, and Murray made it back in 2019 for a brief operation, and these were all SSB operations. So there's a huge demand out there, I think, right now for CW, RTTY, certainly now FT8, FT4, some of the other modes. So we hope to satisfy a lot of that demand. Next, please. So the flight to Sable is all important. Some really interesting issues with flying to Sable. It's visual flight rules, both directions. Fog is always a challenge. Big issue. Debbie, the chief pilot for Sable Aviation, cannot depart Halifax until she is guaranteed that she can return to Halifax the same day after stopping at Sable. The aircraft simply cannot stay on the island overnight due to potential damage from sand, wind, and any other salt conditions. So very restrictive flight capabilities to get to and from Sable. As I said, Sable Aviation will provide dedicated flights for the expedition. I think Murray's talking about 2 dedicated flights. I think the schedule right now is that Debbie flies out to the island every other week or as needed to resupply the folks that are out there, the Parks Canada folks. So we will have 2 dedicated flights for right now there's 11 operators. So we're all going to have to get out there on 2 flights. Flight time is only an hour and 15 minutes or so. There always is a chance of spending too short a time or too long a time on the island. I guess long would be better. We're going to have some challenges with antennas because of space limitations. We can only put them up about 10 feet, and that's to protect the wildlife. and to also avoid damage from the wind. The last thing we want to have is try and get the antennas up at a height where we thought we might do better, but then only to find them blown over in the wind and damaged. Every antenna will be flagged to alert the birds that they're there. We will manually rotate the Aggies. We'll use a rope on the back and move it around with a weight. And we expect steady and strong winds. We'll be pleasantly surprised if that's not the case. We'll try to do frequent logging updates so that folks know they're in the log. I understand the internet was limited, but it has improved. So we hope to if we can do more each day, we'll do multiple uploads. Propagation, the numbers should continue to improve. We're on the upswing. I think you can all see that every day. We just had a very large CME hit, so the bands are pretty quiet right now, pretty bad. But that's to be expected. But the good news is there are sunspots, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that additional sunspots will provide frequent openings on those difficult paths, particularly to Asia and Australia. Next, please. Go ahead. Thank you. So the all-important permission. Murray has a great working relationship with Alana at Parks Canada. They've met frequently throughout the years. Timing will be, we're hoping for October. Alana will provide dates for travel as far ahead as possible in coordination with Murray and Sable Aviation. COVID, hopefully no issues. We hope by October of next year it's a bad dream, but I think we're all vaccinated, and hopefully there'll be no restrictions as far as any kind of quarantine issues. Flight restrictions, I've talked about that multiple times. It's all dependent on weather and beach conditions. And we do have to think about team flexibility if we get to Canada, Halifax, and we do have either weather problems or some COVID issue that was unexpected. We'll have to make some decisions on the spot, particularly if the delays are going to be extensive. Next, please. This is the team, and what a team it is. I won't go through every person. I invite you to go to the website that I showed earlier, and everybody's record is up there. These are some really experienced and talented operators, technicians, people. So I'll let you do that. I won't take time to do that right now. But anyway, a special shout out to Pat into IEN, who has helped us tremendously in the past with his piloting skills, and of course Murray for his leadership in getting all this done. Next, please. We're going to get to Halifax. Team members will travel independently to Halifax via air or ground, depending on where they live. Once we get the clearance to travel to Sable, hopefully again, no COVID restrictions, and we hope they were just a bad dream at this point. Murray will leave from North Carolina, and he'll have a pretty sizable cargo truck with the antennas, a lot of the hardware, and he'll come up I-95. I live about a half an hour off 95, so he'll swing through and pick me up. By then, we'll have if we don't have the rigs by then, the equipment, the transceivers, either Murray will have gone to Texas to pick them up, or I will have met Bill K5DHY halfway to pick them up. He had them prior to the CY9C operation, did a great job with the laptops and the equipment, testing that stuff ahead of time. We'll do the same this time. So Murray will swing by and pick me up here in Centerville, and we'll make the fairly long journey up the East Coast to Halifax, bringing all the primary equipment. Of course, the other operators will bring anything personal they want to, as far as keyers and ear equipment, things like that. Next, please. This is the first class lounge at Sable Aviation. It's the boarding lounge. You see Debbie there. She is the operations manager for Sable Aviation. And I want to point out that in addition to chief pilot, she's also, in addition to the operations manager, Debbie will be our chief pilot. She also holds several other esteemed titles, including account executive. She's the maintenance manager. That's a really important one. The dangerous goods coordinator. I hope that doesn't apply to us. The aviation safety officer, another very important title for Debbie. And the electronic flight bag administrator. Not quite sure what that is, but it sounds important. So Debbie wears a lot of hats, and we're so happy to be in her hands. Next, please. This is the aircraft that's going to get us out to Sable. It is a Britten-Norman Islander. I think it's probably specially made for landing on beaches. If you look at the tires, it's a high wing aircraft. Probably can go pretty slow speed to land. So it looks like a great plane to get out there. It's been in service for a long time, I think. Next, please. A couple more views of the aircraft to give you some perspective about the size. That's Murray from one of the previous trips, just to show you how high it is. Next. Another perspective. This is Ron from a previous trip, W4DKS. Doesn't look very big, but it holds, Murray said 6 or 8 passengers plus cargo. Now, of course, fewer passengers, more cargo. So that's the aircraft that's going to have two dedicated trips to get us out there. Next, please. This was some cargo being loaded on from one of the previous trips. I'm sure there are some length restrictions. I assume 5 to 6 feet, something like that. So, but the antennas do break down. I know we had similar concerns about getting them on the helicopter going out to St. Paul, and they all fit. Okay, so even the 20-meter monobander broke down into small enough pieces to fit into the cargo hold on the helicopter. So I'm sure it'll fit similarly on the this aircraft. Next, please. It's going to be a tight flight. Thank goodness it's relatively short. Those are, that looks like Debbie in the pilot's seat on the left. So this shot must be from the second row. So there's at least one more row behind, and we'll be anxious to get off the plane, I'm sure, and get some space. Next, please. This is the landing strip, or one of them, I think. I think there are several that can be used, several strips of beach that can be used. You can see the trucks on the left, or the utility vehicles on the left, as they've been out, I guess, testing the beach for compactness and proper dryness or wetness to land. Hopefully it'll be properly packed and dry enough and wet enough. It can't be too dry, but it can't be too wet either. The island team will check the landing area for crosswinds and dryness, and they will then give Debbie a report back in Halifax that it's okay to leave, and she'll be off on her way, and with us, we hope, and this will be the landing strip for us. Next, please. A little broader view of the building. This is you can see in the middle is the weather station. That's now an automated weather station. The guest quarters are to the right with the red line. The long building in front of that in the foreground is the maintenance shop, I think. I'm not quite sure what the other buildings are. I guess we'll find out when we get there. That's some perspective. That's one of the wider parts of the island. Next, please. Okay, I guess I got muted.
Yeah, sorry about that, Dan.
Oh, that's okay, no problem. So this was a photo that Murray included in the batch he sent me, and I didn't know what to call it, so I called it Sable Highway 1. I presume this is one of the roads that leads from the beach to the buildings. Wide enough, obviously, for the utility vehicles or the pickup trucks that'll take us and our equipment to the operation site. Next, please. Now, there's the all important equipment and antennas. We plan to have four positions with ICOM 7300s and passband filters for all the various bands. Very important. As we found out on St. Paul, we'll have laptops for logging, for sending CW for those that want to use laptops for sending CW, and of course for data operations. They worked very well for the FT8. We did not do any RIDI on St. Paul, regrettably, but we will do some RIDI on Sable, I think the plan is, and of course FT8. I'll talk about that in a minute. Amplifiers are TBD. We do plan to have amplifiers. I can't say for sure that we'll have one at each position, but we found that to be terribly important. Running the pileups. I think we had two on St. Paul, and they helped us tremendously keep the frequencies clear and working that difficult path to Japan when we needed the extra boost. Of course, everything's going to be run off of the light power supplies. Just simply don't have the weight to run the bigger power supplies, but we'll be fine. We'll have monoband Yagis. Right now, the plan is for 10, 15, and 20. Murray says we may actually have monobanders as well for 17 and 12, which would be great. That's a lot of antennas. We'll have verticals for 30, 40, 80, and 160. I understand Bob K4UE and Glenn W0GJ have a lot of experience with verticals, and we may even have some phased arrays. And they will, I'm sure, work gangbusters from that saltwater environment. I mentioned the 12 and 17. It could be either verticals or monobanders. Murray's going to take care of that for us. And I think we're going to have the first ever 2-meter EME antenna system along for the ride, and then Lee W4DKS is going to operate that for us. He's a VHF expert. He did a great job on 6 meters from St. Paul. Gave a lot of Europeans and North Americans a big smile with his 6-meter operation from St. Paul in 2019. Over the next year, Murray and the team will assemble and test all the antennas, coax, the transceivers and laptops, the amps, the power supplies, and everything else that's essential to the operation. We're not going to leave anything to chance prior to putting it into boxes and getting it ready to cargo up to Halifax and put on the planes. I assume for probably some space issues, we may have to take some of the equipment out of the boxes, and I guess we'll see weight-wise how that works out. For the St. Paul trip, we actually had the 4 ICOM 7300s, the passband filters, and the power supplies all in a nice box, and fiberglass box, and it was big. It wasn't heavy, but it was large. And I think probably for a flight to Sable with the restrictions and only 2 flights, I think we may have to. I was thinking about that earlier. We may have to take those out of those boxes and either hand carry them or repack them in smaller cases. So just something more to think about during the upcoming year. Pelican cases. Thank you. I was trying to think of the name of the boxes. They're Pelican cases, which you're all familiar with. Next, please. Just a couple of shots of Murray and Ron assembling 15-meter Yagi on a previous trip. I don't know I'm not sure what time of year this was, but you can see it was cold. This might have been the December trip. I'm not sure. Next, please. Another shot of the same Yagi up in the air. No flags on it at that time. I guess they probably took it down and put them on later. You can see the weather shop in the back. Now fully automated. The guest quarters are to your right. Coax runs on the ground, obviously through the windows, I presume, or through through the bottom of the house into the rooms. Pretty nice quarters from what I can see. Looking forward to that part. The tent operation, as you'll see from a few slides back in when we go to St. Paul slides, we were in tents, and tents are for young people. That's all I'll say. I understand that the coax actually goes through a coax panel, so that makes it really, really clean to get into the operating house. Next, please. This is a 10-meter Yagi, same thing. This has been flagged for the birds and the other wildlife. I guess at 10 feet, even the horses could be walking around and hitting the guy wires. So we've got to be really careful with the wildlife. That's our first priority, is to do no harm. Next, please. Okay, here comes the sun. This was the one sunspot that we had occur during the entire week we were at CY9C. It only lasted 2 days, and but I can tell you what, it made a big difference. I went back through space weather and found this spot. It was probably 4 or 5 days into the operation, and suddenly 10 and 12 meters opened up. Not much, but at least they opened up. We immediately jumped on those 2 bands and did what we could during the short openings. Unfortunately, they were mostly, I think, trying to recall, I believe we did work a few Europeans on 12, but it was mostly North America on 10, mostly CW. I know CW on 12. We didn't do any FT8 on 12 or 10 meters. The openings were short, 45 minutes an hour, and poof, they were gone. We did keep it closer out, and over that length of time when the sunspot was doing its business, we did get on the band on 10 and 12 more than a few times and make contacts. Okay, next. This is what we hope it looks like. This is a shot from, I took this from, I think this was from probably around 2012 at one of the peaks. This wasn't even really a peak, but I just thought this was the, just for a visual, I want to say that this is the kind of sunspot activity we want to see, if not more. We don't want to see any major CMEs come our way. That will really dampen things down. But more the better. We just hope that they don't get too eruptive and active on us. With these kinds of sunspots, I think what we would see is a significant increase in the long path to Japan. When I say long path, I mean over the poles. From St. Paul, we had a very narrow window each morning on 20 meters on CW and FT8. Probably an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, where we could work JAs, and then they were gone. And but Europe was always there. We could always count on the Europeans to be there. But with some significant sunspot activity, I think we could hopefully look at major openings throughout the day, throughout the world. Okay, next, please. That's Ron. I think that's Ron operating at the in the previous operation. You see, that's what we expect to do. I think there are several rooms we can operate from, so we're not on top of each other, and hopefully not making too much noise. Next, please. This is an operating schedule and band plan I came up with based on some chats with Murray. The schedule right now in his talks with Parks Canada and Sable Aviation is a 7-day trip. We'll see if we can negotiate anything longer. We sure hope so. It all depends again on weather and flight availability, other external factors, of course, conditions on the island. And Parks Canada does have the final say on the length of stay. Our goal is, like any major operations, to have multiple stations, QRV, 24/7 for the entire stay. During this upcoming year, we will as a group, coordinate and collaborate on an operating shift schedule, so that prior to getting to the island, we all have a good idea of when we're going to work, what hours we're going to work, and what bands we're going to work. Some of that's based on personal preferences, whether you prefer CW or sideband or data. Some of us prefer CW, and we should get our way. That's my opinion. I'm sure there are other varying opinions on the team. We will provide max coverage. Our goal is to have 4 stations on the air at all times. Heavy emphasis on CW and sideband. Also, we'll do some RTTY, FT8, FH mode, and some FT4 if it's desired. I know it is. We'll use traditional DX frequencies, although that's a little less important these days, as you all know. Now, all it takes is one spot on DX Summit to find the DXpedition. So if these frequencies are not available, we'll find a clear spot and park there, and in no time, I'm sure we'll generate a massive pileup. We'll try and start on 025 on CW and up. We'll use and we will listen in the general section as well. I want to make that clear. We did that last time from St. Paul. We actually operated further up towards the general section and listened up. We'll use the standard FT8, FH frequencies and FT4 established frequencies. RTTY we'll just find somewhere above the FT8 and FT4 frequencies. We will do our best to follow the propagation. If we're hearing Japan, we're gonna continue working Japan till we can't work Japan any longer. They're just too hard to work, particularly if the numbers aren't as we hope. Australia, the same way. We'll pay close attention to Australia. Interestingly, some of our openings to Australia from St. Paul were a long path, even though there weren't very many sunspot numbers. We worked some long path on 20 meters. If we go in October as planned, Australia should be a very good path from the east for us on 20 and the other bands. We will follow propagation, and this is an important aspect that I think, based on what I'm hearing now in the bands, is becoming even more important. By next year this time, I expect a lot of folks that have not traveled, a lot of expeditions that were postponed are going to get into high gear just like we are. And October is a prime time. So my guess is that we may not be the only major expedition out there, and that can cause a problem. If you've been on the air at all over the last week or two, you've heard Sugar 9-0, you've heard 3DA0, you've heard the J5 team, all in Africa, and they're all on at the same time. And it's causing, I know they don't intend it, and I'm not sure how they mitigate that, but they are, I've seen a couple of times where they've both been on the same FT8 frequency, Foxhound, at the same time, using the exact same frequency. So we certainly want to avoid that, and we'll coordinate as we look out into next year, as we see planned operations come up on the calendar. We may reach out to them and discuss potential frequency allocation, for lack of a better term, just to make sure we're not causing problems for each other, either indirectly or otherwise, and try and come up with solutions to spread out. Of course, that does mean that we take up a lot more of the usual bands, and we may hear about that too. The other thing I've noticed regarding FT8, one of the Foxhound frequencies on 40 meters, which is a popular frequency, I think it might be 7056, is one of the published FT8 Foxhound frequencies. W4DKS happens to run their Morse training their training hour there, and here on the East Coast, W4DKS is just tremendously strong. And I've noticed, listening to some of those FT8 operations on 7056, that they just get totally dampened by W1AW. I don't know how that sounds in Europe or further out, but here on the East Coast, it almost makes that frequency unusable as far as copying the station. So we'll look at that too. That's something I've noticed recently. Next, please. This, I think, was a takeoff from Sable. Just want to give a big thanks to Debbie and to Sable Aviation for getting the team to and from Sable safely and on time in October of 2022. Next. The all-important QSL, or at least confirmation now. QSL is not the only way to get confirmation, as we all know. Murray's going to handle the direct cards, usual way. OQRS will be activated as soon as possible after the operation, and Bill K5DHY has agreed to handle that. Bill will also provide an LOTW upload, I don't know, probably 6 months after the operation, just to give time for the direct and the OQRS processes to settle down a little bit. Next, please. Special thanks to Parks Canada Sable Island Manager Alana for being so helpful and understanding of our crazy hobby. This meeting pictured here was with Murray in October 2019 when we thought we were going to be on Sable in 2020. Of course, it's been rolled back to 2022, but thank goodness for Alana and her patience. We're gonna get there yet. Thank you, Alana. Next, please. And a special thanks to Pat and to IEN again and his Challenger 350 jet team for getting Murray to Halifax for that October 2019 meeting with Alana. Murray was scheduled to fly via Air Canada, and that flight was canceled due to mechanical problems, and Pat jumped in with his wonderful resources and got Murray up to Halifax to meet on time. Thank you, Pat. Okay, that's the end of the Sable Island part of the presentation. I have a few more slides about St. Paul. I'll take a quick break here and see if anybody has any questions before we move on to St. Paul. Are we on time?
I have a question, if I may.
Go right ahead, sir.
Do you have any plans for 6 meters?
I don't know. That's under discussion. That would be Lee, WW4DKS. He's our VHF guru. I'm sure he's thinking about it. It probably becomes a matter of space for the antennas, unfortunately. So we'll see. We'll discuss that during the next few months. Thanks for asking.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. If not, let's move on to. I'll give you a few slides about St. Paul that kind of got this ball rolling. So next, please. This is St. Paul from the helicopter landing pad. You'll see that in a moment. Decommissioned lighthouse in the background. That's the maintenance quarters on the right. They pretty bad shape, but the maintenance quarters did host our eating facility and one of our bathroom facilities. So it came in handy, even though it was really in disarray. Next, please. This is a view from near the tents, near the operating sites. This is a view from the island we were on. There are 2 islands. We're looking back across the channel to the bigger island. And I understand now that the Canadian Coast Guard has taken over responsibility for St. Paul, and the main island is now off limits. I don't know if any of the previous operations from St. Paul took place on the big island. As you can see from the shoreline, it's really hard to land. So I think the previous operations all took place from this island I'm standing on this photo. It's called the Northeast Island. It's got the one with the lighthouse. It's very small, as you'll see in a moment, but it served the purpose. Canadian Wildlife has oversight for that main island now. That's one of the issues, I guess, is it's now become a a really restricted sanctuary for wildlife. The Northeast Island is under Coast Guard control, and that gives us a little bit of maybe opportunity to go back there. Next, please. This is what I like to call a St. Paul Uber. This was Pat's helicopter and 2 IEN. Great chopper pilot. Made multiple flights. I'm being told by one of the watchers that the previous ops were from the Big Island. Okay, interesting. Did not know that. Thank you. Pat made multiple trips to and from the island. It took I don't remember how many trips to get us all out there. Probably 6 or 8 trips, round trips, from the mainland to the island with the equipment and the operators. And then he made almost daily trips back to the mainland for supplies. He even brought back pizzas, some fresh seafood, whatever we needed when Pat wasn't operating. And he's an excellent CW operator, by the way. When he wasn't operating, he was resting or flying. Next, please. For the gentleman that talked about 6 meters a minute ago, this is the Yagi that was used from St. Paul. I think this is beaming towards Europe. The 6-meter operation took place in that tent in the background. From Lee, W4DKS was back there. Made a lot of Europeans and North Americans happy, I know, with that operation. But as you can see, it's a terribly long antenna. Even broken down, it may be too long for the cargo hold of the aircraft we're going to be taking out there. Next, please. This was the 20-meter Yagi. It's a 203 BA or 203, high gain 203. It is literally on the side of the slope going down to the water. It's barely 10 feet high, if that, but it worked gangbusters. I know being that low to the ground affects the performance of the antenna, but it's much better than any vertical would ever do at the same location. So we'll have hopefully similar amount of monobanders on Sable. Next, please. This is a shot from the lighthouse that Murray took. The 2 operating positions are in the background. You can see the red generators to the left. We had 2 stations in each tent, and the 4 sleeping tents were in the foreground. The tent on the left doubled as a sleeping tent, and I think they did run some satellite attempts. They made some satellite contacts. I don't know what the numbers were, but they did make some satellite contacts, had a pretty elaborate setup, and that was very interesting to watch. Next, please. This is the power station for the entire island. These Hondas were just superb, quiet. I don't think we had a single problem, as I recall. Refueling was quick and easy, and we had one up. We used one up in the maintenance shed to heat our water and to use our hot plate to cook things. Worked great. Highly recommended. Next, please. This is Lee in that operating tent with the 6 meters. He spent a lot of time by himself because he was on the exact opposite end of the small island than we were. So don't know whether that was his choice or not, but that's how it worked out. Probably because of the antenna location. He had some great openings, lots of Europeans. I was amazed. I sat there and watched for a little while, and the Europeans calling were 5 and 9. Next, please. And this is Super CW Op Will, AA4NC. Will has some phenomenal rates on CW, particularly 17 meters. If you worked CY9C on 17, you probably worked Will. Tremendous CW op. I look forward to being on a team with him again. Next. Bill K5DHY is not going to be with us on Sable, but he's going to be an important support to us. This was Bill running the FT8 pile. He was also one of the IT gurus, helped us a lot with the log movement, moving the logs to the internet. FT8 was an interesting mode. I had never seen the Fox end of it work, but It's pretty darn efficient and effective. You were able to, as the call signs come up on the screen decoded, you can select call signs from the list of the queue and move those down to the queue to be worked in the lower right hand corner. So in the mornings from 10:30 Zulu to 1300 Zulu, if the band was open to Japan, we would just call, we'd be on FT8. We'd be getting Europeans and Japan calling at the same time, and we could physically select the Japanese calls from the queue and put them in the transmit queue, and the Europeans we would never call them, even though they were being decoded. So it's pretty efficient. We also, in talking to Murray, it looks like a lot of the FT8 contacts we made were uniques, and these were with hams who live. We presume they lived in restricted areas, HOAs, where they have small antenna systems, maybe dipole attics, verticals in the backyard, low power ICOM 7300s like we were running, and they probably would have never ever gotten in our log on CW or sideband. So FT8, like it or not, is giving these fellows, these hams, I should say, a chance to get in the logs of rare DX stations. So we will use it, and we'll probably make a lot of people happy with it for the first time. Next, please. This is Phil, VA3QR. I like to refer to Phil as our MacGyver. He could fix anything. He's a great phone op too. He ran some great rates on 20-meter phone to, and really handled the Europeans well, even the Italians. Phil's also an IT expert, does it for a living, and thank goodness for that, because we needed help. Next, please. Here I am trying to work through the Italians. Actually, the Italians, I made a joke, but the Italians were actually pretty well behaved. For the most part, the pilots were pretty disciplined. We did focus on the JA windows, and for the most part, we got the Europeans to stand by, because we were basically shooting very close to that path over Europe. When we asked for JAs, we generally got JAs, and everybody else stood by. And with the expected increase in sunspots and the path propagation, we expect even much bigger pileups and a bigger challenge, but we're up for it. Next, please. This is another shot of the lighthouse from the ground. As I mentioned, Murray climbed up there towards the last of the stay, and some very rickety steps to take some photos, and they came out great. Next, please. And a beautiful sunset from St. Paul. One more, I think. So we're back on the mainland. We thankfully a kind gentleman allowed us to use this field for the helicopter landing pad. This is the group that was on St. Paul. Very happy to be back on the mainland, but what a great feeling it was to have made so many contacts from such a rare spot. And that is the end. Next, please. As Ken mentioned, I am on the IOTA board, and I'd be happy to take questions, but I think we're short on time, so I won't belabor it. But I would like to come back at some point, and if there's interest in IOTA, I'll be glad to come back and give a shorter presentation and answer any questions you might have, or talk about some operations if you like. So with that, I'll turn it back to who? You, Ken?
Yes. Any questions for Dan?
Anybody awake?
I have a question. How do we donate to support this DXpedition?
If you go to the website, there's a listing of the. I think there's a way to donate. I have to check that. I don't know there's a donate button, but I'm sure if you reached out to Murray, he would be glad.
Well, there we are.
He'd be glad to.
That'd be fun.
He'd be glad to work with you on that.